Dear eating disorders community, it's hard to feel like you belong in a world that so often criticises, stigmatises and dehumanises you solely because you live in a fat body. Harder still, it's difficult when you have a lived experience of an eating disorder and you live in a fat body because there is seemingly no room for you in this narrative. This is a long overdue conversation, but it is a courageous and a compassionate conversation that desperately needs to be had. I want you to listen and I want you to reflect. I don't want your pity and I don't want you to feel like you need to rescue me. I need you to listen. I want you to take off all of your expert hats and I want you to hear me. This is not a calling out, but rather a calling in. This is an invitation for us all to act. I believe that as a community we are truly doing some amazing and some groundbreaking work. I use the term we because alongside my lived experience of an eating disorder, I am also a clinician working in this space. I wholeheartedly believe that everybody who works across the eating disorder space wants the very best for the people that they work with. I truly believe that eating disorder providers are some of the most caring and compassionate humans on the planet. This work takes heart. But with that being said, I also believe that as a community we still have such a way to go. Weight stigma shows up in places that we don't believe it should, and the eating disorder community is no exception. The terrifying reality is that fat people are continuously harmed in this space. Despite our best intentions, eating disorder treatment spaces are not always safe spaces for all people in all bodies. I was lucky enough, for the most part, to have access to the treatment that I needed at the time to support my recovery. But that treatment was not free from weight stigma or fat phobia. This is where we are falling short. Microaggressions exist and they are rampant. If you're sitting here thinking to yourself that these microaggressions don't exist, then I need you to think again. There is nothing more humiliating, nothing more degrading, nothing more dehumanizing than having to change into a gown that barely even covered your body and stepping on the scales. Those in smaller bodies that were also completing this program did not have to worry about trying to hold their gown closed at the back as to try to maintain one shred of dignity. And as the token fat person also completing this program, to have an apple put in front of me at morning tea time as opposed to the snacks that those in smaller bodies received. What sort of implicit message do you think that this sent? These microaggressions do not stop here. I cannot tell you how many times I've heard clinicians reassuring their clients that they won't get fat. Or in a group setting where clinicians are very distinctly outlining where people should sit within a healthy BMI range. What do you think, or how do you think that this would have felt for a fat person sitting in that group setting? How do you think those messages, which were very clearly directed at those in smaller bodies, would make a person in a larger body feel ashamed, unworthy, like a failure? When we reassure those in smaller bodies that the aims of treatment are not to make them fat, we are perpetuating fat phobia, plain and simple. We are reinforcing the idea that fat is the worst possible thing that you could be. This once again dehumanizes those of us who are actually living this reality, who are actually living in fat bodies. We are unconsciously driving people outside of this narrative. Fat people already feel as though they have no place here, because our treatment spaces are seemingly only set up for one type of body, and that is a smaller body. This hurts. This runs deep. The hurt, the shame, the disgust, the unworthiness. It swims inside your veins and it threatens to drown you. Please do not shame us or dehumanize us any further. For me, these experiences weren't just humiliating, they were insulting. These experiences erased my lived experience as someone in a larger body. The implicit messages are everywhere. You have no place here, you don't belong here, your body is wrong. It doesn't matter whether or not you are sitting here thinking to yourself that this isn't our intention. This is beside the point. The point is, experiences like this aren't just happening to me, they are happening for so many fat people across this space. This isn't okay. Our treatment spaces need to be safe spaces for all people in all bodies. I will even go so far as to say that we absolutely cannot be in the business of treating eating disorders unless we are simultaneously willing, unless we are simultaneously willing to address issues such as fat phobia and weight stigma in this space. If we are not prepared to examine our own levels of weight bias and address the rampant fat phobia that already exists in these spaces, then I honestly question our intentions. We truly say that we treat eating disorders because if these microaggressions and blatant fat phobia continue and we give them permission to continue by reinforcing them, then we have become such a huge part of the problem that we are trying so hard to solve. Fat people are continuously spoken for and about by those in positions of power and privilege. In this space, clinicians and researchers speak for us as experts on our lives. I am tired and I am fed up with clinicians and researchers claiming expert status on something that they know absolutely nothing about. The obesity rhetoric that we hear day in, day out positions fat people as problems to be solved. Why on earth are we continuing to morph eating disorder treatment and obesity prevention? Why on earth are we even considering this approach? This only seeks to benefit those in smaller bodies, whilst those of us in larger bodies are again rendered humanless and again pushed outside of this narrative. If we are truly serious about supporting people to heal their relationships with food and their bodies, we have to first stop positioning bodies as the problem. Plain and simple. When you position yourself as an expert in treating both eating disorders and obesity, you become part of the problem. When you are so invested in making larger bodies smaller, you become part of the problem. When you essentially prescribe behaviours for those of us in larger bodies that would be deemed pathological for those in smaller bodies, you become part of the problem. Fat people are repeatedly harmed in this space. Our bodies are reduced to mere problems. Our humanity is stripped. Fat people constantly feel the need to have to explain, to have to justify, and to have to apologise for their bodies. Please do not reinforce this shame, blame, and disconnection. If you are struggling to understand why positioning eating disorders and obesity together is so harmful and so traumatising, then I ask you to consider the following. Has your body ever been referred to as an epidemic? Has your body ever been referred to as a national health crisis? Have you been told time and time again that your body is wrong, that it is a disgrace? Have you felt pressured every single day to have to justify your existence on this earth as a fat person? Just stop and think. According to public health standards, I am a walking epidemic. My body is a national health crisis. I am a drain on our public health system. My body is wrong. And whilst obesity in itself is not officially classified as an illness, a disease, or a disorder, bodies like mine are certainly seem like this in this light. I am somehow rendered less of a human being simply because of the body I inhabit. All of the obesity rhetoric positions fatness as something that is pathological, that somehow fatness is a problem to be solved. We need to be very clear that weight is not a behaviour and that fat is not pathological, and at no point should fat bodies ever be positioned as problems to be solved. The focus on obesity and eating disorders provides a platform for eating disorders to flourish. Fat phobia breeds eating disorders. Fat bodies are not the problems in this equation, and they never will be. If you are feeling uncomfortable sitting here, listening to everything that I've said so far, then I'm glad. I'm glad. This discomfort that you may be feeling right now is absolutely nothing compared to the discomfort, the stigma, the prejudice, and the downright hatred that people in larger bodies have to deal with on a daily basis. This is nothing in comparison. I need you to feel it, and I need you to get a sense of why things have to change. Feel it. and think about the ways in which we are absolutely damaging some of the most incredible human beings on this planet. Feel it. Because if you hold an incredible amount of body privilege, this is about as close as I can get to you feeling even a fragment of what it is like to navigate this world as a fat person. This is only a fragment of what it is like to navigate a world in a body that is deemed an abomination to our society. How dare I exist in this body? Yes, I'm angry. Yes, I'm sad. When clinicians assume the role of expert, this seeks to diminish the capacity for an individual to trust their own body and to claim autonomy over their experience. If you're speaking for and about fat people without having considered the lived experience of those who are actually living this reality, then you need to reconsider. This further marginalises and silences those whose voices need to be heard in this space the most. When voices are silenced and experiences are erased, we miss out on so many valuable learning opportunities. This is a balance of evidence-based practice and practice-based evidence. Lived experience is a powerful teacher. You can learn a lot if you are just willing to listen. You may even be wondering why I've used the word fat so many times. You may even be sitting there cringing each time you hear me say it. You may feel uncomfortable or uneasy with the word fat. You may even be sitting here having such a visceral reaction to the word. This is actually the point. This is proof. This is where the work is. Fat is a word that has held so much stigma. We equate fat with bad and fat with lazy and fat with unworthy, whether we like it or not. For me, fat had always been a word that was fraught with fear. I grew up being afraid of fat. I grew up being afraid of my own body. Fat was always a word that was hurled in my direction, but it was cloaked in shame and it was dripping in insults. I have worked so hard over the years to reclaim this word for myself. It is now a benign, neutral descriptor of my body, much like my brown eyes. My point being that I have had to do this work myself. I have had to unlearn everything I have been taught and everything society still believes about fat. At the moment, this is an individual process, when in reality, we need to be making huge systemic shifts. I use the word fat to describe my body. And if this makes you uncomfortable, then this is rather telling. This says so much more about you and your beliefs than what it ever will about me or my body. I've always felt like I have no place in this space, that somehow my experience of an eating disorder and recovery were not as valuable, that my voice was not as important, that somehow my still being fat excluded me from both practicing as a clinician and sharing my recovery success. This is the way that I have been conditioned to think. And unfortunately, this is also supported by the dominant narratives in eating disorder spaces. I don't see larger bodies represented in our national media or fundraising campaigns. People in larger bodies are not represented in recovery narratives. People see bodies like mine and automatically assume that I must still be experiencing an eating disorder because I can't possibly be this fat all of the time. The sad reality is, bodies like mine are still some people's before photos. Weight stigma tries to strip you of your worth. Fat phobia tries to reduce your humanness into wrongness. I am not wrong. I have value. My story has value. I will not apologise for saying all that I have said here today. I will not apologise for taking up space. I will not apologise for bringing these issues into light because I am done with apologising. When it comes down to it, the question that we must be asking is not how can I best support my client in a larger body to lose weight, but instead, how does my client experience their own body? What impact does weight stigma have on their life? How can I validate this experience of systemic oppression, discrimination, and downright hatred of fat bodies without also reinforcing in some way that my client's body is a problem that needs to be solved? Most importantly, I want you to ask yourselves, how can I challenge my own bias? How can I challenge my own prejudice? What beliefs do I have about people in larger bodies? How much of this am I unconsciously bringing into the work that I do? As providers, you have a responsibility to do no harm. This has to be at the very core of everything that you do. Bodies do not need to be fixed, but human beings certainly need to be heard. Weight stigma harms everybody, but most importantly, it harms those whose bodies come under constant scrutiny. People in larger bodies spend their lives attempting to shrink themselves, and those in smaller bodies spend their lives being absolutely terrified of one day looking like me. I cannot even begin to tell you how much that hurts. I am only one person. I am only one voice, one story. But there are so many other stories like mine. I have been afforded the privilege to share my voice, to speak from experience, and to bring these issues into the forefront of all of our minds. I'm not only speaking for me, but I'm speaking on behalf of all people in larger bodies who have been hurt and who have been silenced in this space. Sharing this reality with you, it isn't just for me. Sharing this reality with you is for every single person whose voice has been lost, whose body has been shamed, whose worth has been brought into question. I don't want you to feel sorry for us or pity us. I want to see action. I want to see change. I want to see the work being done by those who need to do it the most. This is everybody's responsibility. Your commitment to helping others heal means absolutely nothing if you are not willing to do the work yourself. This is all of our responsibility. The reality is that it takes courage to take up space in this world. It takes courage to show up in a body that our world does not make room for. It takes courage to show up in an eating disorder space and say that we are getting it wrong and that we need to be doing better. What makes me angry and what makes me incredibly sad is the fact that as a fat person, it shouldn't have to be an act of bravery for me to claim space in this world. I shouldn't have to feel like I'm ruffling feathers or rocking boats by saying everything that I've just said here today. What I have realised is that this discomfort that I am feeling, it's not mine alone to own. This discomfort is yours. It's ours to own. I will not take responsibility for holding the discomfort of others any longer. I will not take responsibility for holding the fear that others have around fat bodies or around bodies like mine. We, as a community, we need to lean all the way in. We need to own it and we need to take responsibility for it. If we are not prepared to do so, then we are wasting everybody's time. Yes, it's confronting to hear that as a clinician, your past or current practices are perpetuating harm. Yes, it's confronting to hear that as a collective of leaders in our fields that we are getting it wrong and that we still have so much more to learn. I believe that we can do better. If we are silent in the face of weight stigma, then we are giving it permission to thrive. If we are giving weight stigma permission to thrive, we are continuing to fertilise a breeding ground for eating disorders. Silence equals complicity. If we are not prepared to respect and hold space for the lived experience of all people in all bodies, then why are we here? What is the point? Hi everyone, my name's Nic McDermid. I'm a social worker, a counsellor and an eating disorder recovery coach. And most importantly, I am somebody with a lived experience of an eating disorder. The clip that you've just seen was what I had delivered and what I had the privilege of delivering on stage in front of over 450 conference delegates at the Australia-New Zealand Academy for Eating Disorders conference in Melbourne this year. I was fortunate enough to be part of a Weight Stigma plenary with the amazing Sarah Harry and the incredible Scott Griffiths and Jo Doley as our amazing chair. And this was a game changer. This was where you could hear a pin drop. Our plenary it's indescribable. I don't even have the words to put to the experience, but this is something that every person that works in the eating disorder space needs to hear. this is raw, this is vulnerable, this is real, this is the experience. I mean, I know that it's only my experience, and I know that I was getting up there talking about, you know, my experience in this space, but there are so many other people's experiences that are just being pushed outside of this narrative, and this is what we need to be focusing on. Just the amount of emotion in the room. I mean, it was one of those you had to be there moments. It was one of those moments where I finished saying what I had to say, and I looked up at the room, and pretty much everybody in that room was on their feet and wiping away tears from their eyes and snot from their nose, let's face it. People were sobbing. And it was one of those moments where I felt seen, and I felt heard, and I felt respected. And reflecting on it afterwards, I think it was one of those moments where I had anticipated walking into a room of 450 eating disorder professionals and only a handful of people actually hearing what I had to say. You know, I was expecting to be dismissed. I was expecting people to roll their eyes. I was expecting to feel like I have been feeling my entire life, that my voice was not worthy. And when that didn't happen, wow, I can't even put words to that experience. I'm still sitting with it and still processing it. And I've had so much feedback and so many people asking me whether there was an opportunity for me to be able to share what I'd said at the conference with the world, and I felt compelled to be able to release this clip and share it with you all. So I hope that I've done everybody out there justice, and I really hope that this rings true. I hope that this can provide a platform for people to do better, because as a community we need to be doing better. This is just the start. This is just the start of where things change, and I'm excited to see where this ends up, but sit with it, take it in. You know, this is just the beginning. Thank you.